She took her only son to the ICU, only to see her billionaire CEO ex, the son's father, with his sick new wife in the same ward. The alarm buzzed at exactly 6:30, but Alvina Buckridge was already awake, standing in her tiny kitchen while pancake batter rested in a chipped blue bowl. She glanced toward the hallway. "Jefferson, if you don't get dressed now, I'm eating both pancakes." A sleepy voice drifted back. "You always say that. And one day I'll mean it." Moments later, a 10-year-old boy with messy hair shuffled into the kitchen wearing mismatched socks and a grin that made every exhausting week worthwhile. He stole half a strawberry from the cutting board. "I saw that. You can't prove anything. I have eyes. You need evidence." She laughed despite herself. Their apartment was modest, every shelf carefully organized because there wasn't room for clutter, but it carried warmth that expensive houses often fail to create. For a little while, bills waiting on the counter didn't matter. Only breakfast did. As Jefferson packed his backpack, Alvina checked her banking app. The number on the screen was lower than she hoped. Rent had cleared. Utilities had cleared. The after-school science club payment was due tomorrow. She locked the phone before her son noticed. "Mom? When I grow up, I'm buying you one of those coffee machines that talks. The fancy kind, the really fancy kind. I'll settle for one that works." He nodded seriously. "Deal." Instead of worrying aloud, she tucked another homemade lunch into his bag and straightened his collar. Some promises were easier to keep than others. Outside the apartment building, the crossing guard waved. Jefferson adjusted his backpack. "I've got gym today. Try not to race everyone. I have to." "You absolutely do not." "What if somebody challenges me?" She folded her arms. "Then you politely lose." He gasped dramatically. "Mom, that's terrible advice." She reached over and brushed hair from his forehead. "Come straight home after school." "I always do." "I know." He hugged her tightly before jogging toward the entrance, turning once to wave. She waved back until he disappeared through the doors. Neither of them realized their ordinary goodbye would stay in her memory forever. Less than an hour into her shift, Alvina's phone vibrated across her desk. Lincoln Elementary. She smiled, expecting a forgotten lunchbox. Instead, she heard hurried breathing. "Miss Buckridge, this is Principal Martin. Jefferson collapsed during gym class. Paramedics are here now." The world narrowed. Her chair scraped backward so violently it tipped onto the floor. "What do you mean collapsed?" "He lost consciousness. They're transporting him immediately." "I'm coming." She ended the call before anyone could say another word. Her fingers shook so badly she dropped her car keys twice before reaching the parking lot. Traffic lights became obstacles instead of signals. She barely remembered fastening her seatbelt. At every stop, she gripped the steering wheel harder. One voicemail from an unknown hospital number appeared. She couldn't bring herself to listen. Instead, she whispered into the empty car, "Stay with me, sweetheart." Her breathing turned uneven. She forced herself to inhale once. Then again. Nothing else existed except reaching her son. By the time Alvina arrived, the ambulance doors were closing. She caught one glimpse of Jefferson through the rear windows. An oxygen tube rested beneath his nose. A paramedic noticed her. "Are you his mother?" She nodded. "He's stable enough for transport, but the doctors need more tests." "What happened?" "We don't know yet." That answer landed harder than any diagnosis. No certainty, no explanation, only motion. The siren sounded again as the vehicle pulled away, and she followed behind with both hands locked around the wheel. Emergency staff met the stretcher before it stopped moving. Voices overlapped. "Blood pressure. Notify intensive care. Prep another room." Someone handed Alvina forms. Someone else asked about allergies. Another nurse requested insurance information. She answered automatically, barely hearing herself. Jefferson reached weakly toward her. "I'm okay, Mom." She leaned close enough for him to hear. "You don't have to be brave for me." His small hand squeezed hers once before the team guided him toward the elevators. The ICU doors opened. Alvina stepped forward. Then she stopped. Across the corridor stood Harvey Ross, tailored suit, silver watch, hair touched by the first signs of age. He looked up from a folder in his hands. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Recognition crossed his face slowly before disbelief took over. "Alvina?" She couldn't answer. Another woman beside him rested lightly against the wall, her expression tired but kind. She looked from Harvey to Alvina and sensed a conversation that had begun years before she entered the picture. Softly she asked, "Harvey, do you know her?" He never took his eyes off Alvina. "Yes." Only that. One word carrying 11 years. The nurses rolled Jefferson into position. His eyelids fluttered open. Still weak, he looked first at his mother, then at the stranger standing several feet away. Something held his attention. Perhaps the familiar eyes. Perhaps nothing he could explain. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Mom, who's that man?" Alvina swallowed. Every answer felt impossible inside a hospital hallway. After a long pause, she said quietly, "Someone I used to know." Harvey lowered his gaze. No accusation, no protest, only silence. And if this reunion has already captured your attention, subscribe now and stay with us, because the truth behind that single sentence is about to reshape every life in this story. 11 years earlier, Harvey Ross arrived at the university's financial literacy outreach program wearing faded jeans and an old sweatshirt that hid every clue about his family's fortune. He was assigned to help organize paperwork. Instead, he found himself arguing with a young volunteer over the correct way to arrange folding tables. "They should face the windows," Alvina insisted. "People will be distracted. They'll also have sunlight. They're here to learn. They're also human." For reasons he couldn't explain, losing that tiny debate amused him more than winning any boardroom negotiation ever would. By lunchtime, he was still moving tables, exactly where she wanted them. The following week, they met again at a neighborhood cafe after finishing another volunteer shift. Harvey ordered an imported espresso. Alvina raised an eyebrow. "Does it come with stock options?" He looked confused. "It's just coffee. It costs more than my lunch." He laughed. "I hadn't noticed." "I can tell." She pushed her plain cup toward him. "Try regular coffee." He took a sip. She waited. "Well, it's coffee." She burst into laughter. For the first time in months, Harvey forgot every pressure waiting for him outside that little shop. They never rushed into romance. Instead, they collected ordinary afternoons. Used bookstores became competitions to see who could find the strangest title. Street musicians earned applause from both of them, even when they missed half the notes. One rainy Saturday, they spent an hour helping an elderly bookseller move heavy boxes instead of browsing the shelves. As they left, Harvey asked, "Does everything become an adventure with you?" She smiled. "No, I just don't like wasting chances to be useful." The answer stayed with him long after the conversation ended. Several months into their friendship, Alvina walked past a television in an electronics store. Harvey's face filled every screen. The headline beneath it identified him as the heir to Ross Global Technologies. She looked from the display to the man carrying grocery bags beside her. "You forgot to mention something." He followed her gaze. Oh, I didn't think it mattered." She stared another second before shrugging. "Can you still carry these bags?" "I think so." "Then we're fine." That unexpected response reached him more deeply than admiration ever could. They developed habits that quietly became traditions. Sunday evenings belonged to riverside walks. Every birthday included handwritten letters instead of expensive presents. Whenever Harvey arrived late from meetings, Alvina pretended to check an invisible watch before announcing, "I was about to replace you with someone punctual." "You interviewed candidates already?" "Several. And?" "They all failed." He would grin every single time. Friends noticed the change. The ambitious young executive looked lighter whenever she entered a room. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Harvey returned to the same food truck where they had accidentally switched lunch orders. The owner recognized them instantly. "You two again?" "We're making this official," Harvey replied. The elderly vendor laughed. "Then you still owe me for that extra lemonade from last year." Alvina covered her face. "I told you he remembered." Harvey reached for his wallet. "Apparently so." They spent nearly an hour talking with strangers gathered nearby, leaving with stained napkins and happier memories than any expensive restaurant could have offered. That summer, crowds gathered along the waterfront waiting for the fireworks display. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Musicians performed nearby. As the first burst of color lit the skyline, Harvey slipped a tiny wrapped box into Alvina's hand. Inside rested a silver compass. She turned it over carefully. "It's beautiful. It reminds me of something." "What?" "No matter where life takes us, I never want to lose my way back to you." Her eyes softened. "Then don't stop looking." "I won't." They stayed until nearly everyone else had gone home. Cleaning crews had already begun collecting empty cups and folding chairs. The river reflected the last fading lights overhead. Alvina rested her head against Harvey's shoulder. "What do you think we'll be doing in 10 years? He considered the question. "Hopefully arguing about where to put furniture." She laughed. "That's your dream?" "My dream is wherever you're standing." She reached for his hand. "Then remember tonight. I couldn't forget if I tried." Neither of them realized how fiercely that promise would be tested. For years afterward, Harvey kept that same silver compass close by, never suspecting it would become the only physical reminder of the woman he loved. And Alvina carried the memory of that riverside promise into every difficult season that followed. If you're already wondering how two people so devoted to one another could be separated for more than a decade, make sure you're subscribed. because the next chapter reveals the calculated betrayal that altered the course of 3 lives. After dawn, he almost ignored it, assuming it was another early meeting reminder. Instead, his uncle's strained voice met him. "Get to St. Matthew's Hospital. Your father collapsed during a board presentation." The drive felt endless. By the time he arrived, relatives, attorneys, and senior executives had already gathered outside the critical care unit. A physician approached with careful words. "He's alive, but recovery will take time." Within hours, another conversation began. Someone from the board quietly said, "The company can't wait. We need leadership now." Harvey glanced through the glass toward his father's room. Only yesterday he had been planning a weekend picnic with Alvina. Now hundreds of employees and billions of dollars rested on his shoulders. He texted her. "Emergency at the hospital. I'll explain everything later," she replied almost immediately. "Take care of your family. I'm here when you're ready." He smiled for the first time that morning. The executive conference room felt colder than any hospital corridor. PowerPoint slides replaced personal conversations. Financial forecasts replaced birthday plans. Every opinion seemed wrapped inside another agenda. One director leaned back. "Investors expect certainty." Another added, "They'll question your experience." Harvey met every challenge calmly. "I'll earn their confidence." When the meeting finally ended, he checked his phone. 6 missed calls from Alvina. He dialed immediately. She answered on the second ring. "I thought you forgot about dinner. I forgot what day it is." A brief silence followed. Then she laughed softly. "That's okay. I'll save your portion." He closed his eyes. "Thank you." For a few seconds, her voice reminded him there was still life outside the company walls. Across the organization, Executive Strategy Director Shani Schimmel observed the leadership transition with quiet attention. She rarely raised her voice. She rarely lost control. Her influence came from preparation. During one planning session, another executive remarked, "Mr. Ross seems distracted lately." Shani responded without emotion. Attachments create vulnerabilities. The comment lingered. Over the following weeks, she studied more than quarterly reports. She reviewed Harvey's schedule. She noticed repeated personal appointments. She learned one name appeared often, Alvina Buckridge. Instead of reacting immediately, she filed the information away. Some opportunities improved with patience. Harvey finally managed to arrange an evening free. He arrived at their favorite neighborhood restaurant carrying flowers that cost less than most executive lunches but meant infinitely more. Alvina accepted them with a smile. "You remembered." "I almost didn't." "Honest answer. I promised I'd stop pretending." Halfway through dinner, his phone vibrated. Then again, he silenced it. 5 minutes later, another call arrived. Alvina reached across the table. "You should answer. I'd rather stay. And tomorrow you'll regret ignoring it." He sighed. "I hate when you're right." She winked. "I know." He stepped outside. When he returned nearly 40 minutes later, their meals had gone cold. She never complained. That quiet understanding only made him love her more. Late one evening, Shani reviewed media monitoring reports, public perception, investor confidence, brand protection. Every chart reinforced one conclusion. Harvey's growing relationship with someone outside elite business circles would become a distraction if competitors decided to exploit it. She closed the file and stared through the office window. Removing obstacles had always been part of corporate strategy. This obstacle simply happened to be human. Her assistant knocked. "The legal team is waiting. I'll be there shortly." She gathered her papers with perfect composure. By morning, the first pieces of her plan were already moving into place. 3 weeks later, financial news exploded with allegations. Confidential documents had supposedly been leaked. Anonymous sources claimed someone close to Harvey Ross possessed restricted files. Television anchors debated motives. Social media accounts repeated rumors without evidence. Then Alvina's photograph appeared beside one headline. She stared at the screen in disbelief. Her coworker whispered, "Is this really about you? I've never even seen those documents." By lunchtime, reporters waited outside her apartment building. Neighbors watched from balconies. Every camera seemed aimed directly at her front door. Harvey stormed into the emergency board meeting. "This information is fabricated." Several investors exchanged uneasy looks. One finally replied, "Facts matter less than public confidence." He slammed a folder onto the table. "Then let's establish the facts." Lawyers requested investigations. Public relations teams drafted statements. Crisis consultants proposed distancing the company from personal relationships. Harvey rejected every suggestion involving Alvina. "She's innocent." His certainty never changed. Unfortunately, certainty alone couldn't stop rumors already spreading across every major outlet. Outside her apartment that evening, another photographer shouted, Did you sell company secrets? She lowered her head and kept walking. Inside, she locked the door before breaking down. When Harvey called, she answered but couldn't speak. Alvina? Silence. I'm coming over. No, we need to face this together. You have enough battles already. I choose this one. Tears slipped down her face. So do I. After hanging up, she looked around the apartment they had imagined sharing one day. For the first time, doubt entered her heart. Not about Harvey, about the cost of loving him. By sunrise, the pressure from investors, reporters, and hidden enemies had reached a level neither Harvey nor Alvina could fully understand. They believed honesty would eventually clear everything. They had no idea someone inside the company was making certain the truth never reached either of them. Subscribe now, because the next chapter reveals the heartbreaking separation that stole 11 years from two people who never truly stopped waiting for each other. Harvey ignored 3 board members calling his name as he rushed out of headquarters. He drove straight to Alvina's apartment, rehearsing everything he wanted to say. We'll fight this together. I don't care what the headlines say. I know you. He reached the building and took the stairs 2 at a time. The hallway was unusually quiet. He knocked. No answer. He knocked harder. Still nothing. An elderly neighbor opened her own door and looked at him with sympathy. Are you looking for the young lady in 4 billions? Yes. Is she home? She slowly shook her head. A moving truck came this morning. She left before lunch. His heartbeat stumbled. Did she say where she was going? No, dear, just that she needed a fresh start. Harvey stared at the closed apartment door, refusing to believe he had missed her by only a few hours. The landlord arrived carrying a small envelope. She asked me to give this to you if you ever came. Harvey took it with unsteady hands. Inside rested a single folded sheet. The message was painfully brief. I hope one day you learn the truth. Nothing else. No address, no explanation, no goodbye. He read it again, then again. The words refused to change. Long after the hallway emptied, he remained outside that apartment, holding a letter that answered none of his questions. Across the city, Alvina sat alone in a neighborhood clinic after weeks of unusual exhaustion. The doctor entered with a warm smile. Congratulations. She blinked. I'm sorry, you're expecting. For several seconds she simply stared. The room became silent except for the faint ticking of a wall clock. A laugh escaped her before tears followed. She placed both hands over her face. When she finally looked up, the doctor handed her a tissue. Would you like someone called? Alvina gently shook her head. No, her voice barely carried. But I know exactly who should have been here. Notebook. On the first page she began writing. Harvey, today I learned we're going to be parents. She described the appointment, her fears, her excitement, her belief that once he knew, everything could still be repaired. The following morning she mailed the letter directly to Ross Global headquarters. Walking away from the mailbox, she whispered, Find me. She believed he would. She had every reason to. She didn't know the envelope would never reach his desk. Mail sorted through executive correspondence passed briefly across Shani Schimmel's office. Her assistant placed a cream-colored envelope on the stack. Personal delivery for Mr. Ross. Shani noticed the sender's name, Alvina Buckridge. Without changing expression, she picked it up. Forward the remaining files. After the assistant left, she opened a shred bin beside her desk. The envelope disappeared inside without ever being logged. A machine hummed quietly. Paper became fragments. Fragments became nothing. When Harvey checked his mail later that afternoon, the letter he had unknowingly waited for was already gone. Alvina refused to surrender after one unanswered letter. She phoned headquarters. Reception transferred her. Then another office transferred her again. Finally, a polite voice returned. Mr. Ross is unavailable. I'll wait. I'm afraid that's not possible. Please tell him Alvina called. We'll leave a message. The call ended. No message was ever delivered. She tried again 2 days later, then the following week. Every attempt vanished before reaching Harvey. Each silence convinced her he was choosing distance. Each silence convinced him she no longer wished to be found. Determined to make one final effort, Alvina hired a local attorney. The lawyer scheduled a formal appointment with Ross Global. After returning from the meeting, he looked deeply uncomfortable. They informed me Mr. Ross reviewed your request personally. And? They said he declined further contact. Alvina sat motionless. Did they really say that? I'm sorry. She thanked him politely before leaving. Only after reaching the sidewalk did she allow herself to cry. Inside Ross Global, Harvey spent that same afternoon approving budgets, completely unaware anyone had tried to reach him. Weeks turned into months. Alvina stopped writing, not because she stopped loving Harvey, because she believed every unanswered attempt had already given her his answer. She rented a smaller apartment in another part of Chicago. She accepted extra shifts. She folded tiny baby clothes into a second-hand dresser. At nearly the same time, Harvey expanded the search. Private investigators checked university records. Friends were contacted. Former neighbors were interviewed. Every report ended the same way. No confirmed address, no forwarding information, no trace. Both believed the other had walked away. Both were completely wrong. Separated by lies they couldn't see and decisions they never truly made, Harvey and Alvina entered the next chapter of their lives carrying the same unanswered question. Why didn't the other fight for us? Keep watching, because the next part follows two very different journeys unfolding under the same sky, one raising a little boy with quiet determination, the other building an empire while searching for the family he never realized he had already lost. Jefferson Buckridge entered the world just after sunrise with a loud cry that made every nurse in the delivery room smile. The first time Alvina held him, exhaustion disappeared beneath relief. She brushed a fingertip across his tiny hand. "Hello, sweetheart." The newborn wrapped his fingers around hers. A nurse chuckled. "He already knows his mom." Alvina whispered another promise. "You'll never doubt that you're loved." Years later, that promise shaped every decision she made. One evening, after helping him finish a school project, Jefferson looked up from the kitchen table. "Mom?" "Yes? Was I allowed, baby?" "You made sure the whole hospital knew you had arrived." He grinned proudly. "Good." Money rarely stretched as far as Alvina hoped. She learned which grocery stores discounted bread before closing. She repaired torn backpacks instead of replacing them. When Jefferson needed a costume for a history presentation, she transformed an old curtain into a colonial-era coat with borrowed buttons. He admired himself in the mirror. "It looks amazing." She tilted her head. "It looks homemade." "It looks like you made it." To him, there was no greater compliment. That night she skipped dessert so he could have the last slice of pie without realizing there had only been enough for one. Their apartment building had roof access for maintenance workers. The superintendent knew Jefferson loved astronomy and quietly allowed supervised visits. Every Friday evening, mother and son carried folding chairs upstairs. They shared homemade pizza from a cardboard box, balanced between them. Jefferson adjusted a toy telescope toward the stars. "Do you think my dad ever looks up here too?" Alvina rested her chin on her knees. "I think he probably looks at the same sky." "You really believe that?" "I do." He accepted the answer without another question. Far away, another person happened to be staring upward. At almost the same moment, Harvey Ross became one of the youngest chief executives in the country. Magazine covers praised his leadership. Television interviews celebrated quarterly growth. Investors applauded record-breaking numbers. After one awards ceremony, an assistant approached. "Everyone's waiting for you at the reception." Harvey loosened his tie. "You go ahead." He slipped outside instead. Across the street stood a small coffee cart. He ordered 2 drinks before realizing there was nobody beside him. The vendor held out the second cup. "You still want it?" Harvey paused. After a moment, he quietly answered, "Yes." He carried both away anyway. Every anniversary of his first date with Alvina followed the same routine. No interviews, no business dinners, no exceptions. He drove to the riverside bench where they once spent hours talking about impossible futures. The silver compass remained inside his jacket pocket. Sometimes he opened it. Sometimes he simply held it. An elderly jogger who often passed by eventually smiled and asked, "Waiting for someone?" Harvey looked toward the water. "I've been waiting for years." The jogger nodded as if understanding more than Harvey expected. "Don't stop." He never did. On one side of the city, Alvina attended parent-teacher conferences, celebrated spelling test victories, and fixed bicycles with borrowed tools. On the other, Harvey negotiated international mergers and addressed shareholders in packed auditoriums. She clipped coupons before grocery shopping. He approved billion-dollar investments. Yet both paused whenever they passed street musicians performing songs they once enjoyed together. Both still preferred secondhand bookstores. Both still ordered pancakes on Saturday mornings. Without knowing it, their habits continued echoing one another across 11 separate years. Several years after losing Alvina, Harvey met Golly through a charitable medical foundation. Unlike reporters and executives, she asked almost nothing about his wealth. Instead, she asked, "What made you support children's hospitals?" He smiled faintly. "Someone once taught me that helping people matters more than appearances." Over time, friendship became trust. Trust slowly became marriage. One quiet evening, she found the silver compass while helping organize a drawer. She handed it to him. "You've kept this for a long time." "I have." "It belongs to someone important," he answered honestly. "Very." She returned it without another question. Respect sometimes sounded exactly like silence. Back on the apartment rooftop, Jefferson carefully adjusted his telescope again. "Mom, another question?" He nodded. "If my dad ever met me, do you think he'd like me?" Alvina reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "I think he'd be proud before he even knew your name." The boy considered that answer. "Maybe one day I'll meet him," she forced a smile. "Maybe." After Jefferson went to bed, she remained outside alone for several minutes. For the first time in years, she wondered whether hope had quietly survived beneath all the disappointment. 11 years passed without a single conversation, yet neither Harvey nor Alvina ever completely closed the chapter they once started together. One kept searching. The other kept believing there was no point in searching anymore. Neither could guess that an ordinary school day and one frightened little boy were only hours away from bringing those separate lives crashing back into the same hospital corridor. If you're invested in their journey, subscribe now, because the reunion you've been waiting for is only the beginning of the truth. The intensive care waiting area was filled with quiet conversations and untouched cups of coffee. Alvina sat at the edge of a plastic chair, twisting the hospital wristband around her arm. Every few minutes she looked toward the ICU doors. Every few minutes they stayed closed. A nurse finally approached. "Mrs. Buckridge," she stood immediately. "Your son is resting comfortably. The doctors are ordering additional tests. Can I see him?" For a few minutes. Relief arrived only halfway. Additional tests meant they still lacked answers. As she followed the nurse, another familiar voice drifted from the opposite hallway. "Thank you, doctor. I'll make sure she gets some rest." Her steps slowed. She knew that voice before she even turned around. Hours later, Alvina stepped into an elevator carrying a small paper cup of tea. Just before the doors closed, Harvey entered. For several floors, neither spoke. The silence became almost unbearable. Finally, Harvey cleared his throat. "I've wanted to ask this question for 11 years. She stared ahead. "So have I." He looked toward the glowing floor numbers. "Why did you leave without telling me?" Her fingers tightened around the cup. "I wrote to you. I never received anything." She slowly turned. "I wrote more than once." The elevator stopped. The doors opened. Neither moved for another second. Then they walked away in opposite directions, carrying even more questions than before. As they passed Jefferson's room, the boy sat upright reading a science magazine. Near midnight, exhaustion finally drove Alvina downstairs for food. Most stations had already closed. Only soup and sandwiches remained. She reached for the last turkey sandwich at the exact moment another hand did. Harvey immediately pulled back. "You take it. You saw it first." "I'm not hungry," she almost smiled. "You used to say that whenever you skipped lunch. And you never believed me. I still don't." The cashier quietly slid another sandwich onto the counter. "I just found one in the cooler." Both laughed softly. It lasted only a moment, but it felt strangely familiar. The next morning, Harvey accompanied Golly to another consultation. He looked up politely. "Hi." Harvey smiled. "Good morning." Jefferson returned to his article but tilted his head in a way that struck Harvey unexpectedly. The expression felt oddly recognizable. Later, Harvey mentioned it. "I can't explain it." Golly looked through the glass. "He does seem familiar. I've never met him before." At least that was what Harvey believed. A volunteer entered Jefferson's room carrying puzzle books. The boy thanked her before organizing everything into neat little stacks. Harvey noticed. He had arranged paperwork exactly the same way since college. Then Jefferson absent-mindedly tapped his pencil twice against the table before writing. Harvey froze. He had inherited that habit from his own father. He watched another moment. The similarities continued. Coincidences existed, but how many could exist before they demanded attention? Later that afternoon, Harvey found Jefferson alone while nurses changed equipment nearby. The boy looked up. "Are you visiting somebody too?" "Yes. My mom says hospitals make everyone tired." "They certainly do." Jefferson closed his magazine. "What do you do for work?" "I help run a technology company." The boy's eyes widened. "That's awesome. What do you want to do someday?" "I'm still deciding." "Take your time." "My mom says good decisions don't like being rushed." Harvey chuckled. "Your mom gives excellent advice." Without realizing it, he had just complimented the woman he once planned to marry. That evening, Golly watched Harvey through the hospital room window. He wasn't checking emails. He wasn't making business calls. His attention kept drifting toward Jefferson. When Harvey finally returned, she asked gently, "Can I tell you something without upsetting you?" "Of course." "I've never seen you look at anyone that way." "What way?" "As though you're trying to remember something your heart already knows." He didn't answer. Instead, he sat quietly beside her bed. She reached for his hand. "Whatever this is, don't ignore it." After visiting hours ended, Alvina tucked Jefferson's blanket around him. He studied her face. "Mom? Yes?" That man seems nice. She knew exactly who he meant. He does. How do you know him? She searched for the right words. We were friends a long time ago. Were you close? She hesitated. Very. Jefferson accepted the answer but noticed the sadness in her eyes. Before falling asleep, he quietly wondered why talking about one stranger could make his mother look as though she had misplaced an entire lifetime. By the end of the second day, Harvey couldn't shake the feeling that fate had placed him in the same hospital for a reason. Golly sensed it. Alvina feared it. And Jefferson, without knowing why, already trusted the man who kept stopping outside his room. Subscribe now, because the next chapter uncovers the medical questions that force everyone to confront a truth no one is prepared to hear. On the third morning of Jefferson's stay, a pediatric specialist entered carrying a clipboard. She smiled warmly. We're updating his family medical history before ordering another round of tests. Alvina nodded. Of course. The doctor worked down the page. Any history of heart disease? My mother had high blood pressure. Diabetes? No. Then came the question Alvina dreaded. The father's medical history? Her hand paused over the form. I don't have current information. The doctor didn't press. She simply wrote a note. If you remember anything later, let us know. Sometimes even small details can help. Alvina stared at the unfinished section for several seconds before quietly closing the folder. Later that afternoon, another physician reviewed Jefferson's chart while Harvey waited outside Golly's room. The doctor glanced from the paperwork to Harvey, then toward Jefferson, then back again. Finally, he chuckled to himself. You know, that young man down the hall has your eyes. Harvey looked surprised. I've heard stranger things. It happens. Families often resemble complete strangers. The physician continued walking. Harvey remained where he was. His hand slipped into his jacket pocket and rested on the silver compass. The comment should have meant nothing. Instead, it stayed with him for the rest of the day. Golly invited Alvina to sit with her while nurses adjusted medication. Their conversation began politely. Soon it drifted toward life outside the hospital. You're raising Jefferson alone? Golly asked. Alvina smiled faintly. I've never really thought of it that way. He's never let the house feel empty. And his father? For the first time, Alvina hesitated. We lost each other years ago. By choice? I used to think so. Golly studied her expression. You don't sound certain anymore. I'm not. Before another word could be spoken, a nurse arrived with fresh instructions. The conversation ended, but the question lingered. That evening, Harvey found himself outside Jefferson's room again. The boy waved him inside. I beat my puzzle book. You finished every page? I skipped the easy ones. Harvey laughed. I used to do exactly the same thing. Jefferson tilted his head. Really? Really? The child smiled. My mom says I get stubborn when I'm curious. Harvey almost replied, I know someone exactly like that. Instead, he stopped himself. As he walked away, Golly quietly stepped beside him. You see it too, don't you? He answered without looking up. I don't know what I'm seeing. While gathering fresh clothes from home, Alvina accidentally dropped an old wallet onto her bedroom floor. A faded photograph slipped free. It showed two university students standing beside a food truck laughing at something outside the frame. Harvey and her. Jefferson picked it up. That's you. Yes, the man beside you. She gently took the picture back. We knew each other a long time ago. He looks happy. He was. So were you. She didn't deny it. Instead, she returned the photograph to its place with more care than before. The following morning, Harvey requested a confidential meeting with one of the hospital's senior physicians. I have an unusual question. The doctor folded his hands. I'm listening. If there were reason to confirm a biological relationship between two people, what would that process involve? The physician answered professionally. There are legal procedures and consent requirements depending on the circumstances. Harvey nodded slowly. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I understand. I just need certainty. As he left the office, he realized this was the first time he had allowed himself to believe the impossible might actually be true. That night, Harvey couldn't sleep. Instead, he opened the drawer of his bedside table at home. Inside rested every object connected to the years before he became CEO. Concert tickets, old receipts, a bookstore loyalty card, the silver compass. Beneath them lay a folded receipt dated 11 years earlier. He smiled sadly. Alvina had written across the bottom in blue ink, Don't forget Saturday pancakes. He never had. The realization struck him with painful clarity. If she had truly wanted to disappear forever, why would her final note have read, I hope one day you learn the truth. Back at the hospital, Alvina replayed every unanswered phone call, every returned silence, every letter that vanished without explanation. For years she had blamed Harvey. Now doubt crept in. What if he had never seen any of them? What if someone else had stood between them all along? She remembered an executive assistant who always insisted, "Mr. Ross isn't available." The same voice, every time. Her thoughts accelerated. Had she trusted the wrong people? Before she could explore the idea further, a nurse entered. "Ms. Buckridge, the cardiology team is ready for another consultation." She rose immediately. Some answers would have to wait. The hospital still hadn't explained why Jefferson collapsed. But another mystery had quietly taken center stage. For the first time in 11 years, Harvey and Alvina were both asking the very same question. Who made sure they never found each other? Harvey arrived at Ross Global before sunrise. The building was almost empty except for security staff and a handful of early analysts. His chief legal officer met him outside the records department. "I thought everything from that period had already been digitized." "So did I," Harvey replied. An archivist unlocked a storage room tucked behind the accounting offices. Metal cabinets lined the walls, each filled with documents dating back decades. Harvey removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "If the truth exists anywhere, we'll find it." The search began with shipping logs, visitor records, and executive correspondence from 11 years earlier. At first, nothing stood out. Then the archivist frowned. "Sir, these mail records have missing pages." Harvey looked up immediately. "Missing? They've been removed." For the first time that morning, hope mixed with suspicion. The legal team reconstructed old delivery schedules using archived backups. One pattern repeated itself. Private correspondence addressed directly to Harvey had frequently been redirected through executive strategy. At the top of nearly every authorization sat the same signature. Shaney Schimmel. The attorney adjusted his glasses. "Would she have had authority to intercept personal mail?" "No." "Then why would she approve these transfers?" Harvey didn't answer. He simply stared at the signature. It looked ordinary, but ordinary handwriting had concealed extraordinary damage. He quietly instructed, "Keep digging." An IT specialist entered, carrying an external hard drive. "We recovered fragments from an old backup server. I thought those recordings expired years ago." They did. This survived because it was copied during a software migration. The video quality was poor, faces blurred whenever someone moved too quickly. Still, one clip caught everyone's attention. A receptionist handed several envelopes to an assistant. The assistant walked directly into Shaney's office. The envelopes never came back out. No one spoke while the footage played again. Harvey finally broke the silence. "Zoom in." The image sharpened just enough to reveal one handwritten return address, Alvina Buckridge. By afternoon, investigators located Melissa, a retired administrative assistant who had worked under Shaney. She agreed to meet at a quiet cafe. Harvey thanked her for coming. She looked nervous. "I've wondered if someone would ask about those years. What do you remember?" Melissa lowered her coffee cup. "There were instructions." "What kind?" "If mail arrived from certain names, it wasn't logged through the normal system." "Whose instructions?" She hesitated, then answered softly, "Miss Schimmel's." Harvey's jaw tightened. "Did anyone question it?" "A few people did." "And?" "They didn't stay very long." Melissa recalled one more detail. There was a storage box she refused to destroy. The company maintenance supervisor helped retrieve it from a basement archive scheduled for disposal. Inside rested meeting notes, expense reports, and several sealed envelopes. One envelope carried Alvina's unmistakable handwriting. The date matched the week she learned about her pregnancy. Harvey carefully opened it. The first line blurred as emotion overtook him. "Harvey, I don't know how to tell you this, except to say we're going to be parents." He stopped reading. His hands trembled. 11 years had disappeared between one sentence and the moment he finally saw it. Harvey remained alone in the conference room after everyone else stepped outside. He unfolded the letter again. Alvina had described morning sickness, her fears, her excitement. She had even joked that their child would probably inherit his terrible parking skills. A quiet knock interrupted him. His legal officer entered. "Are you all right?" Harvey looked at the paper before answering. "I missed his first smile," he swallowed. "His first word." Another pause. "Every birthday." No courtroom victory or business achievement could recover those lost years. The realization settled heavily over the room. Shaney received the meeting request just before lunch. She entered the executive boardroom expecting another strategy discussion. Instead, she found Harvey, company counsel, and 2 outside investigators waiting. The atmosphere was unusually calm. Harvey slid a folder across the table. "Please explain these records." She skimmed the pages without visible concern. They're old administrative files. So you acknowledge handling them? I handled thousands of files. He placed Alvina's unopened letter beside the folder. Recognition flashed across her face before disappearing. It was enough. Everyone in the room noticed. For several moments, nobody moved. Then Shaney leaned back. I believe the company came first. Harvey's expression remained steady. So you decided my personal life belonged to you. You were becoming emotionally compromised. You destroyed innocent lives. I protected the business. Harvey shook his head. No. He pushed another document toward her. You protected your own idea of control. Outside counsel spoke next. Based on the evidence before us, this matter will be referred for appropriate legal action. For the first time since entering the room, Shaney had nothing left to say. Harvey finally knew why every letter disappeared and why every phone call reached a dead end. The mystery that haunted him for more than a decade had an answer, but discovering the truth was only the beginning. He still faced an even more difficult task, looking into the eyes of the young boy waiting in a hospital room and finding the courage to say the words that should have been spoken 11 years earlier. The next chapter brings the first genuine conversation between a father and the son he never knew existed. Harvey stopped outside Jefferson's hospital room with the unopened portion of Alvina's letter still folded inside his jacket. He had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions. He had addressed thousands of shareholders. Yet nothing in his career prepared him for taking one more step through that doorway. Alvina noticed him through the glass. For a brief moment, neither spoke. She quietly walked into the hallway and closed the door behind her. Did you find something? Harvey looked at her with eyes carrying equal parts grief and relief. I found everything. She searched his face. My letters? He nodded. They existed. And you never read them. I never even saw them. Silence settled between them. Then Harvey reached into his pocket and carefully unfolded the first page. I know about Jefferson. Alvina closed her eyes, not because she feared the truth, because it had finally arrived. Neither of them tried to blame the other. There was no energy left for that. Harvey spoke first. I'm sorry for every birthday I missed. You didn't know. I'm still sorry for every school play. I'm sorry for every scraped knee. I'm sorry. His voice finally broke. For not being there the day he was born. Alvina stepped closer. You were robbed too. He shook his head. So was he. The weight of lost years could not be erased. But for the first time they were carrying it together instead of alone. When they entered Jefferson's room, the boy looked up from a puzzle book. He smiled. Hi, Mr. Harvey. Harvey pulled a chair beside the bed. Would it be okay if I sat here for a minute? Sure. An awkward pause followed. Then Harvey glanced toward Alvina. She gave the smallest nod. He turned back to Jefferson. I've recently learned something very important. Jefferson waited patiently. Harvey swallowed. I believe I'm your father. The room became very still. The boy blinked once, then twice. Instead of speaking immediately, he looked toward his mother. She nodded through tears. It's true. Jefferson processed the news with surprising calm. After nearly a minute, he asked only one thing. So you didn't leave because you wanted to? Harvey answered without hesitation. No. You didn't know about me? No. And if you had known, I would have come running. The boy studied him carefully. Finally, he smiled. I think I believe you. Harvey laughed softly through wet eyes. I hope one day you believe it completely. I probably will. For Harvey, those 3 words felt like a gift. Recovery gave them time together. They played chess in the hospital lounge. Harvey lost twice. Jefferson celebrated each victory enthusiastically. You missed my rook. I definitely did. My mom misses it too. I can see that. Another afternoon they worked on a model rocket kit donated by a local charity. Harvey accidentally attached one fin backward. Jefferson folded his arms. Terrible parking and bad rocket building? Harvey stared. Who told you about my parking? My mom. The 3 of them burst into laughter. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, joy outweighed regret. After Jefferson's condition improved enough for supervised outings, the doctors approved a short breakfast visit to the hospital cafe. Harvey ordered pancakes. Jefferson did the same. Alvina smiled from across the table. You've both chosen exactly the same thing. Harvey looked at his son. Good taste. Jefferson pointed toward the syrup. You use too much. So do you. Alvina laughed. I've been outnumbered. Nearby visitors simply saw a family sharing breakfast. Only the 3 of them understood how extraordinary that ordinary moment truly was. Golly requested a private conversation with Alvina before another treatment session. Alvina arrived uncertain of what to expect. Instead of anger, she found kindness. "I've had time to think. I'm sorry. You don't owe me an apology. This situation isn't fair to you." Golly smiled gently. "Life isn't always fair, but people still choose who they become." She reached into her handbag and removed the silver compass. "Harvey left this in my room by accident." Alvina stared at it. "I think it belongs with the family that started its journey together." For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Some gestures required no explanation. That evening, Harvey found Golly reading beside the window. He sat quietly. "I don't know how to thank you." She closed her book. "Then don't. I've turned your world upside down." She shook her head. "No." She looked toward Jefferson's room. "The truth did that." Harvey reached for her hand. "You've shown more grace than I deserve." She smiled. "I simply refuse to let someone else's deception decide who I become." It was one of the many reasons Harvey respected her so deeply. Their friendship remained intact, strengthened by honesty instead of broken by resentment. A father had finally met his son. A mother had finally learned she was never abandoned. And a woman caught in the middle had chosen compassion over bitterness. Yet one chapter still remained, because promises made beneath fireworks years earlier were waiting to be fulfilled, and one small silver compass was about to guide a family toward the place where their story first began. Subscribe now, because the final chapter brings healing, closure, and a homecoming 11 years in the making. Nearly 3 weeks after his collapse, Jefferson sat on the edge of his hospital bed while a cardiologist reviewed the latest test results. The physician finally looked up with a reassuring expression. "Your recovery is progressing better than we expected." Jefferson glanced at his mother. "Does that mean I can go home soon?" "If everything continues this way, yes." Alvina covered her mouth, holding back tears she had postponed since the ambulance ride. Harvey quietly released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. For the first time since fate reunited them, the future felt larger than the hospital walls. Discharge day arrived with paperwork, prescriptions, and reminders about follow-up appointments. A nurse handed Jefferson a small certificate naming him the bravest patient of the week. He grinned. "I'm framing this. You absolutely should," Harvey replied. As automatic doors opened, sunlight greeted them. Jefferson stretched his arms. "I forgot fresh air could smell this good." Alvina laughed. "You've been indoors too long." Harvey looked from mother to son. For years he had imagined finding Alvina again. He had never imagined leaving a hospital beside the child he never knew existed. Life had rewritten every expectation. Several evenings later, Harvey invited Alvina and Jefferson to a quiet park overlooking the same river where so many memories had begun. He reached into his jacket. "I've carried this almost every day." The silver compass rested in his palm. Alvina's eyes widened. "You still have it. I couldn't let it go." He placed it gently in her hands. She traced the familiar engraving with her thumb. Jefferson leaned closer. "What's so special about it?" Harvey smiled. "It reminded me never to stop looking for someone important." The boy nodded thoughtfully. "I think it worked." Harvey brought a small box. Inside rested every recovered letter investigators had found. Some remained unopened, others showed only slight wear from storage. Alvina carefully unfolded the first one, then another. With every page, forgotten hopes returned. She laughed at jokes she barely remembered writing. She cried at fears she had carried alone. Harvey listened quietly. "I would have answered every single one." "I know." That simple sentence healed more than either expected. The silence between them no longer carried doubt, only understanding. One Saturday morning, the three visited the old food truck where Harvey and Alvina had accidentally exchanged lunch orders years before. The owner studied them carefully, then recognition spread across his face. "I remember you two," Harvey smiled. "So do we." The elderly vendor noticed Jefferson. "Your son?" Harvey answered proudly. "Yes." The vendor handed the boy an extra lemonade. "On the house." Jefferson looked at his parents. "Did this happen before too?" Alvina laughed. "Almost exactly. Some places seemed to preserve memories until people were ready to reclaim them." Weeks later, the city's annual celebration filled the waterfront with families. Music drifted through the crowd. Children pointed excitedly toward the evening sky. As the first burst of color appeared overhead, Jefferson stood between Harvey and Alvina. He reached for both their hands without saying a word. Harvey glanced toward Alvina. "I never stopped searching." She looked back at him. "I know." Then she added with quiet certainty, "And you finally found us." The fireworks continued, but neither of them noticed anything except the family standing beside them. On the drive home, Jefferson turned the silver compass over in his hands. "Can I keep this someday?" Harvey smiled through the rearview mirror. One day. What if I lose it? Alvina answered before Harvey could. Then you'll do what your father did. What's that? You keep looking until you find your way again. The boy considered the answer. I like that. Neither parent corrected him. They liked it too. The following spring, Harvey attended Jefferson's school science fair. He applauded louder than anyone when his son's project earned first place. Alvina watched from nearby. No photographers, no board members, no reporters, just parents congratulating children. As they walked toward the parking lot, Jefferson slipped naturally between them. For outsiders, they looked like any ordinary family. Only they understood how many lost years had been required to reach such an ordinary moment, and that ordinary moment was worth everything. Some stories end with wealth, some end with revenge. This one ends with truth finally reaching the people it was always meant to find. A mother never stopped loving. A father never stopped searching. A son never stopped believing there was someone missing from his story. And in the end, one forgotten letter, one small silver compass, and one unexpected hospital stay led them back to each other. If this journey moved you, subscribe and join us for more unforgettable stories where hope survives impossible odds and the people meant to find one another never truly lose the way home. 1 year after Jefferson's hospital stay, the Buckridge home looked a little different. The furniture still wasn't expensive. The kitchen cabinet still squeaked when opened, but laughter arrived more often than silence. Harvey stood over the stove trying to flip pancakes. The first one landed on the floor. Jefferson burst into laughter. You definitely inherited your cooking skills from somebody else. Harvey picked up the ruined pancake and surrendered. I'll stick to business meetings. Alvina leaned against the doorway with folded arms. I warned you. You absolutely did. Harvey never tried to replace 11 missing years. He couldn't. Instead, he focused on creating new memories. He attended soccer matches. He helped with homework. He learned which cereal Jefferson refused to eat and which movies he could watch over and over without getting bored. Do you ever wish self-degassed? Do you ever wish things happened differently? Harvey looked at the instruction manual before answering. Every day. The boy tightened another screw. Me too. Then he smiled. But I'm glad you're here now. For the first time in years, Alvina stopped living from paycheck to paycheck. Harvey offered financial support, but she accepted it on one condition. I still want my own career. I wouldn't expect anything less. She returned to university and completed the graduate program she had postponed after becoming pregnant. On graduation day, Jefferson shouted louder than anyone when her name was called. Harvey applauded until his hands hurt. As she crossed the stage, she realized something unexpected. The future no longer frightened her. Several months after leaving the city for specialized treatment, Golly mailed a handwritten letter to both Harvey and Alvina. Inside she wrote, Life has a remarkable way of correcting the mistakes people create. I hope the years ahead bring your family the peace the past denied you. As for me, I have no regrets about choosing kindness. Alvina folded the letter carefully. She's extraordinary. Harvey nodded. I've always believed that. The note found a permanent place beside the recovered letters from years before. On Jefferson's 12th birthday, Harvey handed him a small wrapped package. The boy peeled away the paper. Inside rested the silver compass. His eyes widened. I thought this wasn't until I was older. Harvey smiled. I think you've already proved you're ready. Jefferson opened the lid and read the inscription engraved inside. He looked at both of his parents. I'll take care of it. Alvina gently adjusted the chain around his neck. We know you will. As sunset settled over the city, the three of them returned to the riverside path where Harvey and Alvina had once imagined a future they feared was gone forever. Families passed with bicycles and strollers. Street musicians performed nearby. The old food truck still served lemonade. Jefferson skipped a stone across the water. It bounced 5 times. Harvey tried. His stone sank immediately. Alvina laughed, still terrible. At parking and skipping stones? Consistent, at least. For a while nobody spoke. They simply stood together, grateful that life had offered one more chance. Sometimes the happiest ending isn't about getting back what was lost. Sometimes it's discovering that love waited patiently until everyone was finally ready to come home.